Thanks, Natalia. Sorry for jumping in there, and thanks for the kind introduction. Again, if everyone can see my slides, again, just starting out with a photo, just to remind everybody where we were in the early 1990s with Havel and Lensa signing the creation of the then Visegrád 3, which of course became the Visegrád 4. And I'll tell you a bit more about that in a second, but just to visualize things, and then just a quick look, Natalia, if you change the slide, it's just a really quick overview of what I want to accomplish in the 10 minutes I have. And that's a tough challenge. So basically every section gets 2.5 minutes exactly. You know, so what is the V4? Keeping in mind, everybody, that Visegrád 4 is not exactly a household name, and I'm not saying that as a judgment. It's neither a good or a bad thing, but particularly in Canada, it's not exactly, or North America, not exactly a household name. What led to its creation? How is it still relevant? And concluding with what are its successes and failures. And that's exactly what Natalia asked me to do in the conversation this morning. And I look forward particularly to the questions. Okay. So what I'll do, next slide, please, Natalia. Basically, with every slide, is just try to put out something analytical, something to think about. So in the first slide, we're just, how did this come about? And of all the things I want the audience to take away from this is, most importantly, Visegrád 4 is not the first kind of sub-regional form of cooperation in Europe. We did see the Benelux countries, of course, the Nordic Council, and there's been others, but I would say I would add the Visegrád 4 as one of the most successful. It's a homegrown initiative. I think that's extremely important. In terms of the EU enlargement process, you can't separate the two. So Visegrád 3 and then Visegrád 4, of course, are absolutely integral to the European Union accession process. And I would add that the Visegrád 4 is one of the great success stories of the European Union accession project. Because for me, and again, I could talk about this for a long time, but we don't have that much time, but I found that in 1990, the expectations of the West, of the East, okay, the then East, let's be clear, the then East, I found the expectations were kind of low. And I found that Western policymakers were really hesitant. And that's a story that's less often told in the kind of, you know, the celebratory moments of 1989, the fear and trepidation that some Western decision makers had towards Eastern Europe rejoining Europe, as the saying was at the time. So the Visegrád 4 proved that Central Europe was different. And that's really an important success story, because for me, a lot of decisions were based on fears of the revival of the interwar period, that period of instability between 1919 and 1939, where the fate of Europe was indeed shaped by the outcome of events in Central Europe. And the other things I want to add just are very important: the role of the Central European Free Trade Area, the role of the Visegrád 4 in undertaking EU membership, and of course NATO enlargement. And finally, again, keep in mind the V4 is very flexible. It doesn't have formal obligations, and the members are not forced to do things as a group. And I think that's a strength. Okay, Natalia, the next slide. So this is a bigger challenge for me. And again, really mindful of the time. I started with failures, and I'll end with successes, because I always say you need to end on a positive note. So failures, let's think about these and then take them up in the question and answer period, everybody. Ukraine should and is at the forefront of the V4 agenda, and the V4, you know, is a strong advocate, and alongside the Baltic states, everybody, of Ukrainian integration into Euro-Atlantic structures. As we've seen, that's been a little bit less successful. We can discuss how much of the blame falls on Ukraine and how much of the blame falls on, you know, let's say the inability of the V4 to push the Ukrainian agenda, or more generally, the failure of the EU. So the question becomes, you know, who lost Ukraine? And maybe Ukraine lost Ukraine. The other failure, I think, again, I find that perspectives offered in Warsaw and Budapest on, you know, a Europe of nations, and I refer here to these national sovereigntist projects. I've tried to avoid in this presentation some of the politically charged language that certain media use to describe the governments in Hungary and Poland, but you do see a divergence in views regarding the European project, with Poland and Hungary in one space, Slovakia in a totally different space, especially now, and the Czech Republic somewhere in between. So that could be a factor there to create some cohesion in what the V4 have as a collective vision for Europe, you know, in terms of this deepening and enlarging. The last point is Balkans. We can talk about that. As Natalia mentioned, I'm really an expert on the Balkans more than Central Europe. But the V4, I think, could have done more to hasten Balkan enlargement. But having said that, again, where do you lie the blame? Some of it has to be placed on the Balkan states entirely, but we can just take that up later. Natalia, the next slide, please. Now we're talking about successes. This is where I want to spend a little bit more time and just go into a shred of more detail, because this is the gist of the presentation. Okay, successes. I think the V4's biggest success is that it simply survived. Because the V4 was largely set up to counter the prevailing public opinion that Central Europe would head down the nasty path of the interwar period, with all the tensions that brought. And also remember that the V4 was pronounced dead on many occasions. And moreover, everybody, there were many times when there was a lot of trouble within the V4 especially. I can look back and think of the conflict between Hungary and the Czech Republic over the Beneš decrees. We can also look at the period in Slovak history between the early 1990s and 1997, and often hostile policies that came from Bratislava under then Prime Minister Vladimir Mečiar. But having said that, its cooperative instincts prevailed, so it survived well past main goal. And don't forget, its main goal was to facilitate European Union enlargement, or membership for the Visegrád states. And moreover, it was supposed to facilitate NATO membership, and both of those were achieved. And as a success, again, you need to look at the Balkans, because reminding everybody, there are two Visegráds, one's in the Balkans, one's in Hungary. Having said that, the Visegrád 4 gave us an entirely different story of success, of regional cooperation. I do believe it's an emblematic story for the Balkans even today. The other big success was negotiating together when the EU was preparing to kind of stall the Schengen entry. The Visegrád countries came together to ensure that that was not the case. Another big success, everybody, was the Eastern Partnership, which, as you know, is a kind of a drilled down aspect of European neighborhood policy. I do believe the Visegrád 4 plus the Baltic states have been exceptional at promoting deeper engagement with places like Moldova, as I said, Ukraine, Azerbaijan, Armenia, Georgia, etc., within the framework of the Eastern Partnership. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this is where I need to be a bit cautious. I do believe the migration crisis, and crisis is an overused word. I highly doubt that 1 million people arriving in a continent of 500 million constitutes a crisis, but clearly the bar is low for crisis at that point, where the bar is high right now. Having said that, the cooperation the Visegrád 4 achieved on the migration issue could be counted as a success for the V4. And my final point, everybody, and this is something that I actually am going to students engage more heavily with, is the International Visegrád Fund. This is the cornerstone of the Visegrád 4. It's the only permanent aspect of the Visegrád group. And having said that, it's shown enormous capability for funding initiatives and supporting joint cultural projects, et cetera, within the V4 group. And it's something that I think all of us deserve to learn more about. And if I look at my clock, I think I'm done in terms of my time. And I conclude with a final slide, Natalia, where I say, just a quick photo of what the Visegrád 4 looks like now. This is the contemporary grouping. And of course, like all of us, except for those of us at home right now, the Visegrád 4 leaders are, of course, wearing masks. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attention. I look forward to the questions.